Hey everyone, and welcome back to Dice Roll Drama. Before we get going on what we're going to do today, I do want to apologize for my unannounced hiatus from the channel. Unfortunately, as a devout follower of our divine education overlords, I can't guarantee that scheduling issues are never going to happen again. What I can promise is that I now have a backup plan, and that is that I will release some sort of chill side content to keep you guys entertained in the meantime, if it's looking like one of our episodes is going to get delayed. So it's never going to get as bad as a 6-week absence again. However, if even that isn't really working out scheduling wise, we'll just bump things down to 1 episode a week instead of 2. But that's like a last case scenario type of thing. So now let's go over the dragon vote. But I will say, in the event of a override, in the event that a dragon didn't receive input on its override poll, I decided to count that as a non-override. It just seemed like it simplified things. So let's go over the voting results. Tom was voted to have the Whispering Death. June was voted to have the Flightmare, and the Bubblehorn was voted into our campaign. I decided that June should be the main trainer of the Bubblehorn because she tried to tame one in the show. Next, we have D'Angelo getting the Deadly Spinner, Alex with a Mist Twister and a Snowtail, because the Snowtail wasn't overridden. And lastly, we have Eugene with a Nightlight. So, here's a quick, you guys can pause it if you want, I don't want to get copyrighted. A quick refresh on what the characters look like if you need it. There are 2 things to keep in mind when I'm showing you the redesigned characters. One is that this is with aged up characters. They're all a couple years older than their original counterparts. And second, they're all in a colder environment than the one in the original show. We will start off in Tom. We will go in order of character introduction. Pretty routine. So, I guess I'll also explain what the actual goal of this episode was. This was a bit of a study or a lesson in design translation. So, specifically, I wanted to rework the characters' designs, but I still wanted to make it similar to the original. And yeah, I'm actually going to start with Tom's dragon because we have a little bit of a discussion to start here. My plan for all of the characters and all of the dragons was to keep them consistent with their original colors. So the characters have their original main palettes, and the dragons have their original main palettes of whatever the dragon that they're... jumping forward a little bit, but you can see this specifically in D'Angelo and Webmaster pretty well, I think, in that Webmaster has Plowhorn's colors of blue and gray, and D'Angelo still has the green and yellow that was his main outfit in the original show. Anyway, what makes things interesting is that Eugene's dragon in this campaign is the Nightlight, which means that I cannot just give it Webmaster colors without kind of breaking the canonical details a little bit too much about Nightlights. Because the Nightlights, they're black, white, and gray, blue or green eyes, and the Deadly Spinner is a dragon that is primarily turquoise and purple. So you can imagine a turquoise and purple nightlight would be stretching things a little bit. Yeah, so one potential option is to move Webmaster's colors over to Thunder, because the nightlight's just going to have nightlight colors anyway. Or we can give it, or we still give Tom's Whispering Death the Thunder colors. What you're seeing right now is, I guess, what we'll call a web morph. This is Webmaster's colors on the Whispering Death. Now I say morph because there's a couple other variations that we have to look at. Starting with the first Thunder morph. Also, morph is like the word for variations in snakes, if anyone's confused. This is the first Thunder morph. So, this is inspired by a cinnamon ball python. And I was specifically going for, like, obviously Thunder doesn't have brown scales or red spines or whatever, but I was trying to look for ways to make this as, like, canon friendly as possible for the original franchise. So that led me down a bit of a rabbit hole, which led to me studying snake morphs for a while, and the closest I could come up with for a Thunder morph for Whispering Death would be the cinnamon ball python, or a dragon inspired by it. Now, the other variation we have to the Thunder morph, which is, the gray and the black for the scales, is to swap the red spines for cream ones. And this would reflect Thunder a little bit better than the red and black Whispering Death, because, Thunder is black and white. So I will leave it up to a vote for which of these variations ends up being Tom's dragon color variations, and I don't want to potentially affect objectivity or like add bias to the vote or anything, so I'm going to just leave the dragon blank for the rest of our talk. Tom, when I redesigned him, actually stays very similar to his original, but I decided to tone him down. I feel like in the original show, he's just a little bit over-designed in comparison to the other characters. So, for anyone who hasn't looked at his picture, he has a red, orange, and yellow shirt with a very large rocket graphic and a couple of horizontal stripes. He also, on top of that, wears a jacket, which he never buttons or zips up, that has blue and white and vertical stripes. And this is in comparison to other characters like D'Angelo or Alex being the only other characters to have some sort of like picture on their outfits. D'Angelo in the form of a small winged pin, and Alex in the form of a small power button symbol on her shirt. And you'll notice that I said small. But this isn't even where the pictures end on Tom's outfit, because he has a couple of patches. Now, what I'm doing that doesn't really show up in this angle is I have moved Tom's patches to his backpack. I feel like it just smooths things out a little bit. On top of that, he has his jacket zipped, so that tones down his shirt a little. Although the rocket graphic will be changed to some extent because he's a couple years older. With his jacket, actually, what I should say first is I am a huge fan of the fish out of water design trope, and so I decided to use it for Tom. Fish out of water meaning something like a character coming from a hot climate to a cold climate, and, they bundle up because they're not acclimated or whatever. That's where Tom's hairstyle is coming from. We've never been told where Tom and Olivia were working before coming to Icarus, so I kind of imagine it being someplace with a hot climate and a beach that is also geologically significant somehow. So this is where you would get Tom picking up a hairstyle that seems to be popular with surfers. If you Google popular surfing hairstyles. And Tom's shoes are also a reflection of this in the form of being snow boots with fur at the top. The fur is in order to coordinate with his jacket, which is inspired by pilots' jackets. Pilot jackets seem to have this running theme of having fur around where a collar or a hood would go, so for that reason, Tom gets that around where his jacket hood would be. And another element of this design trope that I have not drawn here is that as the story goes on, he can pick up, a warm hat, some gloves, stuff that you would pick up if you're not really too fond of the cold. But also, you may notice that he seems to mostly have a blue palette, not the blue and yellow of the original show. First of all, that is coming from the missing gloves and hat. But another thing is that as he does actually properly get acclimated to the cold climate, he could zip his jacket down a bit. And the one other detail I would like to draw attention to is that Tom's jacket is too big for him. That's why it comes halfway down his hands, and why the neck collar seems very large. And this is in reference to Tom's legacy arc. But that's Tom covered. Let's actually bounce back to his dragon for a minute. This was a really fun and challenging dragon to redesign. Because let's think of what makes the Whispering Death look iconic. It has spines, or it has a crown of spines on its head, and it also has spines all over its body, which it can just fling around at will. So I was actually at a roadblock for this one until I got inspiration from the Helicoprion shark. Now, because of the position and pose that this dragon is in, it's not particularly visible at the moment. But this dragon's tail is inspired, the ending of this dragon's tail is inspired by the Helicoprion. The Helicoprion is a prehistoric shark with swirly jaws. And the sharks are pretty famous for being able to just have a bunch of extra teeth. So that matched up nicely with the Whispering Death being being able to fling its spines around. In this case, the dragon has these visible spines that it can fling, not the end spine, we'll get to that, but it also has more just under the surface. And from here, even though I'm not making it canonically more aquatic, I did want to make it look more aquatic. So from here, I decided to try replacing the crown of spines with a fin. And I was thinking kind of like jellyfish-like. Like, sure, they don't have bones, but in sort of how, like, wavy they can be. Or not stiff or whatever. However you want to say it. So, from there, I decided that I wanted to make this, like, aquatic look go consistent across its body. Which is why the Whispering Death has why I replaced the spines with fins all the way down its body, was for a visual consistency. And I gotta say, from here on out, I'll probably be a lot less hard on the designs for the How to Train Your Dragon live action. Because it's actually surprisingly challenging to pull off a redesign of something that does not need to be redesigned. But I redesigned it in the interest of fairness because I'm redesigning so many of the 9 Realms dragons. Anyway, side tangent, well, to the side, we lastly have the dragon's tail spine. This is actually pretty much directly the dragon has a sword type of tail. Sword on the end of its tail, basically. That was specifically because Tom's lightning sword in the show is such a big deal to him. And if you look at it right, you'll see that Tom's lightning sword is the shape of its tail. Now, obviously, the lightning sword on its own would look absolutely absurd as a dragon tail. And my workaround for that was to sort of fill in the gaps. So it still has that diamond-shaped hilt, and it still has that, like, diamond-shaped base of the sword. It's just that it's filled in a little bit. Kind of like if Tom made it out of a cut it out of a metal diamond or something. And now I will go ahead and show all of the Whispering Death variations right next to Tom one more time, just so you guys can see what it looks like with the characters colored in. We have the Web Morph. We have the Thunder Morph with the Thunder Morph first variant, let's call it that. And lastly, we have the Thunder Morph with the second variant. Alright, now we move on to June. In the original show, June wears a jacket, leggings, and a pair of shorts on top of said leggings. She had a reddish-purple shirt and a small jade necklace as accent colors. She also wore monochrome aside from said accent colors. Anyway, I decided to rework or redesign her outfit a little bit. I did want to go with a skirt instead of shorts on top of leggings initially, just because I don't think it worked very well for her character design. Probably because her outfit was very stiff in general. Like, and I'm clarifying this specifically to say that it's not like some personal, oh, I don't think leggings on top of shorts ever works. Like, it can work, but it did not work in Dragons the Nine Realms. And so I considered a skirt, but my concern did become, well, then that's kind of going to make her look a little bit too much like Astrid. Potentially. So I decided to go with a sweater dress overall for her design. A sweater dress and purple leggings. She's wearing tennis shoes in my design right here. I figured I'd specify. But obviously most sweater dresses don't come with a hood like June's jacket did. I decided to translate the hood into a scarf. You don't want it getting tangled on something or whatever. So my solution to this was for June to wear an infinity scarf. And this is just a circle-shaped scarf that doesn't have any any extra fabric flowing off the end. If you put the little jade bead she has onto the scarf, it would probably look quite nice. But I decided to just move the jade accent color. But it also gave me the idea to add more of those accent colors of jade and red. So the first thing, and technically taking the place of the jade necklace, is a jade colored hair clamp. And this was to sort of look similar to June's actual proper hair, which she wears in a bun, which it's popular with all age demographics. But I decided a hair clamp would kind of match her character a bit, kind of like what Tom's jacket is doing. Because in the original show, because when I was talking during my narrative critique about potential arcs for these characters, I was like, maybe June kind of keeps her interests and personality hidden a lot, and a hair clamp would kind of be a nod to that. So I also decided to give her a purse, a little green purse, as a way to, like I said, add more of an accent color. And then she also has red tennis shoes, adding a second point of accent color for the red. Now, what are these accent colors for, and why did I want to bring more attention to them? They directly act as a nod to her dragons. The first we have is her Bubblehorn dragon, which has red spines, like her red jacket. And its retractable spines are red too. And the red also is coming from Wu and Wei a little bit here, with the dragon having red spines. And next we have June's Flightmare, which has jade markings on its body. And when it comes to the redesigns for these dragons, I did some reconceptualizing for the Bubblehorn. And that's specifically because, although far less weird than its Rescue Riders counterpart, the Rainbow Horn, its horn being a source of fiery bubbles just still feels a little too weird to work within the mainline How to Train Your Dragon series. So, I decided instead to focus on its ability to ignite its spines. That is why it has fur now. This fur acts like a flint and steel, sort of. When it's like rubbing together, when the dragon chooses for it to do that, or when it's flying or whatever, it will create sparks. And this dragon can use said sparks to ignite not only its visible spines that are on its head all the time, it can also ignite its retractable spines. Now, one additional detail is that this dragon has a Thagomizer, like a Stegosaurus. If anyone's never heard of it, Thagomizer is that set of spikes on the it's that set of spikes that stegos have on their tails. And the placement of the fur, as well as the golden scales from, the gold on Wu Wei, the placement of the fur and the gold on its belly both come from some Qilin inspiration. According to Britannica, the Qilin does have yellow on its stomach. I couldn't find if it was like scales or fur, but that's why I chose to design it that way. And then the spines on the side of its head are also a nod to the Qilin statue in Beijing that Britannica has on their website. The placement of the fur actually came from a different photo, though. It was inspired by a piece of Qilin pottery. And yeah, I decided to have some cultural inspiration with the bubble horn dragon because I think the whole idea of because I'm not against the idea of dragons that were like inspired by different cultures for the How to Train Your Dragon universe. And specifically with June, she used to have Wu Wei. Like in the original show, Wu Wei were her partner, so her dragon partner. So, since she's now, training the Flightmare instead, I wanted to still retain some nods to Chinese culture and Chinese legends for June's dragon. Now, as far as the Flightmare goes, it's a lot more simplified in terms of its redesign. So, you'll notice the anglerfish detail right away for this guy, I'm sure. I decided to sort of reinterpret or repurpose the deep sea fish inspiration for this dragon. And then I decided to give it circular scales, or circular spines, rather than the triangular shaped ones the original one does. I did try giving it a club tail to follow the spines. I decided that kind of deviated too much from the original design. It is a darker blue than Wu Wei, or specifically Wu, but I felt like it contrasted better with the light blue that I felt like it contrasted better with its light blue than Wu Wei's blue. So now we have D'Angelo. And I decided to make his design kind of be a nod to his dad a little bit more. This is obviously seen right... Well, maybe not. This is intended to show up first and foremost in him having short hair, because his dad has short hair. But then also, I decided to swap his vest for a sport jacket. It seems like a really popular trend, for whatever reason, to put lines on sports jackets. So, that is as a nod to D'Angelo's dad's work uniform, which also has a bunch of lines on it. I actually want to call attention to these guys' coordination really quick. So, obviously, D'Angelo wears green pants and the dragon has a blue body, but the dragon's head and chest are gray, like D'Angelo's jacket's gray, and then obviously the shoes correspond with the dragon's tail. I know that was probably obvious, but I just wanted to bring it up anyway. When it comes to his dragon, as far as physical design, the backwards facing legs are they actually have a point of connection to its rest of its body. Kind of like how Toothless has the triangular shaped tail fin that's right behind his wings. And while not actually inspired by that, they work the same way. In that it's supposed to help the dragon if it needs help with its flying. And then with the tail, one of these spikes is very blunt. This is so that it can hang from webs. Meanwhile, the other end is very sharp so that it can cut webs. Kind of allowing these guys to do some cool nest building stuff. And the chest and head of this dragon are armored, while the rest of its body is standard. But that is these two explained. Then we have Alex and her dragons. Alex's design doesn't change a ton, but I did run into a little bit of trouble with having her design reflect her character in the form of giving Tom the oversized jacket. Because all of a sudden, I don't have an immediate idea of how to showcase Alex's personality, Alex's nervousness. And what I decided on was for Alex to have a poncho. These are absolutely awesome outfit pieces, especially for outdoorsy stuff, which is ironic for the character who's not really outdoorsy, but still. If you've never worn one, it's kind of like a hoodie, but it's very loose and flowy, so it kind of works with that like nervousness and hiding theme. And I decided to have her hairstyle change a little bit just to mimic her dragon, where it has its main body referenced by her flat hair, and then it has plates on top referenced by her braid that's on top of. Now, the rest of Alex's outfit is far from outdoor oriented, which is kind of helpful, honestly, and kind of a fun reflection of her character. So obviously you have her sweater boots, not inherently bad, but not like great for outdoorsy snow stuff. Then you have her jeans being denim. We'll move on to her snowtail next. I decided to give this little guy horns like the Terrible Terror, just for a like visual reference to the two species of dragons being related. Next, I did take inspiration from the leafy-tailed gecko and gave it circular toes. This comes from the dragons in the original show, or the snowtails originally being arboreal. I then wanted to do something about the icicles on this dragon, and I decided first of all to make the front icicles more like a mane, like a lion's mane. I decided to take rooster inspiration because the the orientation of some of the feathers was reminding me of roosters. Or not feathers, but some of the icicle spines were reminding me of a rooster. So I decided to go ahead and give this guy a rooster tail, which is actually pretty good for an arboreal dragon because the fact that chickens are actually pretty good at getting up into trees is hilarious with how associated they are with staying close to the ground and grazing on the ground. And lastly, I said the snowtail had a frog-like tail, like thinking, oh yeah, its tail has a bunch of webbing. Its tail does not have webbing, so I decided to give it webbing. And now let's move on to the Mistwister. The teal does not immediately scream feathers, but it is as close a match as the turquoise actually, I think, it's supposed to be turquoise. Anyway, closest that I came up with for feathers is colors without using the eyedropper tool was a turquoise. And obviously the dragon has green, gray, and red very prominently. Turquoise was, from what I've read, turquoise was very valuable in Aztec society, so I did want it to be one of the more dominant colors on the dragon, which is why it's on a dragon's head rather than its spine or fins, which are red instead. And the body and horns are two different shades of silver, the body being a slightly darker silver. This is because Feathers actually does have gray for her underbelly, and Mistwisters seem to have like metal colors for most of their scales. Now I'm getting the Alex connected stuff said and done sooner, because this dragon's actually got a lot of more. This dragon actually does just straight up have Chinese history and culture and legends inspiration, because at the time that I was redesigning it, I actually assumed that June would still get the Mistwister, because that was before I added D&D elements to my podcast. So right away you'll probably notice that this guy is very top heavy. That was inspired by shadow puppetry, which was done in China at one point. It has history there. The reason the dragon's top heavy is in reference to the sort of limitations that shadow art has, at least in the footage that I could, at least in the videos I could find of shadow puppetry. You kind of can't really do 2/3 perspective or 3/4 perspective or whatnot. It's like up, down, left, right, and then you can turn the characters around. And it is really cool. But the dragons, first of all, the flying is a little bit top heavy, but also the design is top heavy in reference to that type of movement that you get from the puppets. So, if they are flying, their heads are usually going to be lower than their tail, which I tried to depict in this pose for them, but I don't know if it 100% came through. And I also was inspired by the legend of the Dragon Gate. So in this legend, other people could tell it more eloquently than I can. The legend is about a carp that it swims up a waterfall and becomes a dragon. And so yeah, that's where so I wanted this dragon to look like it would properly fit into the How to Train Your Dragon universe, which means that the head shape could not be literally a fish, and specifically a carp. I specifically lined this dragon's features up with a carp. But in order to keep it consistent with the How to Train Your Dragon universe, I decided to make the head circular, because this is what we see from dragons like Barf and Belch and Zipplebacks in general. They have circular heads. So I decided to make the Mistwister's head circular as well. But as you'll notice from looking at the fish, the the spine on the head, or the horn on the top of the dragon's head, corresponds to the fish's dorsal fin. The horns correspond to the top of the tail fin, fins to the bottom of the tail fin, and the dorsal fin and the whiskers. Yeah. That is Alex and her dragons. Actually, one more note I guess I can say. These guys are supposed to be able to fold their fin down if they need to. When I was designing it, and designing having Alex sit on their back rather than their necks, because you would think that'd feel more secure when you're riding a dragon, is to sit on its back or its shoulders, not its neck. Lastly, we have Eugene and his Nightlight. Eugene's redesign's pretty straightforward, but he still has red on his design. Obviously the red shirt's not visible, but he does have red for his buttons and for his shoelaces. His jacket, or turtleneck, is the reversible kind. Supposed to be a fun little character detail. Kind of like how in the original show, you kind of just assume he's going to be an antagonist or another villain when he first shows up, and then he becomes one of the dragon riders. So yeah, it has that reversible effect, where if you turn it inside out, it's dark gray on the main body part and then light gray on the cuffs. And his hair still has that short on the sides and then longer on the main part of his outfit, or on the top of his head. But the way that it lies now, in the original show, it kind of moves forward, brushes forward. This brushes to the side in a way that is intended to sort of reference or allude to dragon spines. Now we get to his Nightlight. Now, I'm gonna say it, I was not sold on a Nightlight being one of the main dragons in the original show, so I'm still a little not sold on it here, but we work with what we work with. I will say that Nightlight as a name doesn't quite fit this guy. Obviously the Nightlights could have had Light Fury mates, because there's multiple Light Furies, that population is bigger than the Night Fury population, but I feel like over time these dragons would have started to look a lot more like Light Furies. But the problem is, the Light Furies were not popular in the slightest when they, not necessarily when they got introduced, but they were not very popular in their original form. So I decided to base Thunder's Light Fury traits off of my redesign for the Light Fury, which kind of pulled inspiration from cetaceans and tried to make them more aquatic. This is not the main reason I bring this up, though. It's just to explain some of the traits that our Nightlight here has. You know how Thunder has that giant dent in his snout? I decided to repurpose that as a kind of like a beluga type structure. Belugas have that echolocation kind of structure at the front of their heads. The Nightlights, I decided to have that too. Now, I will admit I didn't get this idea until Dragons: The Nine Realms came along, but still, I just updated my Light Fury redesign and counted it as still a thing. Anyway, The details I want to bring attention to are, on this dragon, it's horns. On Thunder, the equivalent is whiskers. But then also this little spiky part of the dragon's throat. Thunder has that too. And then also the tail shape, but I feel like that one's pretty visible from the start. So, moving back to this guy, obviously the Nightlights would ultimately have more Light Fury DNA as time goes on. But also there's a possibility that they would start to have Sand Wraith or Woolly Howl DNA as well. Now, both of these dragons seem to be somewhat related to the Night Fury, so I decided to take some inspiration from them as well when I was designing this guy, and that's why this Nightlight has, and that's why Thunder, which I may have mentioned that, I may have not. If a character's dragon's name would be out of character, like for instance, Eugene would not name Thunder, I think we can say, then I will be renaming them to something that is more fitting, more in character for whoever they're paired with. But that's why this guy has the Sand Wraith spike on the back of his head, where Toothless would have had those double ear flaps. Dragon still has spines. This is not actually an indication of the shape of this dragon scales. It's just to represent that the scales are thicker, because that was a Woolly Howl trait, is that they have thick scales on their neck. And other than that, this guy's colors are mostly an inverse of Thunder, with the black underbelly, the paws, and the only real change there is the ear and spine. The ear was kind of so I could showcase the namesake of this dragon a bit better. I'm going to say that Thunder's namesake, rather than a thunder marking on his a lightning shape that is on his face because of his scales, I'm going to say that he has a scar on his face that kind of looks like a lightning mark. And this, also it might be a little hard to see, there isn't a whisker there for, Thunder has whiskers there. Anyway, now, the lightning marking on his face ties into some lore that I kind of think would be cool if these guys had in modern day. In How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, Toothless and the Light Fury, so Night Fury and Light Fury, are confirmed to have mirror scales. And these dragons don't need to fly through their fire to activate their mirror scales. We know this because we see the Light Fury using that invisibility on the boat when her ability to, go through the fire would be obstructed. So, what this means is that these dragons probably have a way to heat up their mirror scales internally, or to activate their mirror scales internally, and they just usually prefer to fly through the fire. So, all of this to say that if you wanted to make the Nightlight really interesting, you could make it one that has its mirror scales up more naturally. But let's say Thunder has a preference for staying in mirror mode. Then he's going to need extra food because, I assume it's somehow metabolism related, that they can heat up their bodies without using their fire. So he's using this energy expensive way to go into mirror mode all the time. Then he would have a higher metabolism, higher food needs, and Thunder would be more aggressive. This could be a really fun sort of challenge for the writers to have to deal with for taming this nightlight. By the way, the reason Thunder's line art is all of Thunder's line art is gray was as a little reference to his mirror mode thing. Anyway, that is all of the characters and their dragons redesigns explained. Hope you all have a good day.